Welcome. Today we are opening up a history that is far stranger, significantly more complex, and globally influential than the sweet, bubbly liquid it concerns. We are talking about Coca-Cola.
It's a compelling subject because examining Coca-Cola means we are looking at far more than just a soda. I mean, it's an industrial artifact that spans chemistry, high-stakes business maneuvering, global politics, and, well, some of the most effective branding in human history.
Absolutely. The sheer amount of source material we've synthesized for you demands that we analyze how a 19th century patent medicine managed to become this cultural symbol recognized by nearly everyone on the planet.
And our goal is to really extract the most insightful and surprising facts from those sources. We'll follow the product from its dark, murky origins as a medical concoction right up to its modern geopolitical and environmental impact.
And when you consider the true global scale of this, I mean, in 2013, consumers were drinking more than 1.8 billion company beverage servings each day.
It's almost unfathomable penetration.
It is.
And that scale translates directly into staggering corporate value. As recently as 2023, Coca-Cola was ranked as the world's sixth most valuable brand overall.
And that kind of longevity, that ubiquity, it's not just the product of a catchy jingle or a refreshing taste.
No, it's the culmination of over a century of aggressive, calculated moves, a few lucky breaks, and, as we're about to see, some tremendously questionable initial transactions that form the very shaky foundation of the whole enterprise.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the very beginning, the late 1880s. It all starts with a fascinating character and a very serious problem.
We have to begin with the inventor, John Stiff Pemberton. And the context of his invention is critical to understanding the motivation behind the original formula.
Right.
Pemberton was a Confederate colonel. He was wounded during the American Civil War. And sources indicate that he, like so many other veterans of that conflict, became addicted to morphine.
Morphine was so widely used to treat pain, and dependency was almost an epidemic among returning soldiers.
It was a massive problem. So he wasn't simply a pharmacist playing with flavors. He was actively searching for a substitute for that powerful opioid addiction, and he was leveraging his medical training to find a remedy.
And that search led him to his first attempt.
That's precisely right. His search first led him to develop and register Pemberton's French wine Coca Nerve Tonic in 1885 in Columbus, Georgia.
Now, this wasn't a totally original idea, was it?
No, not at all. It was likely inspired by or consciously borrowed from the highly popular and commercially successful French Corsican coca wine known as Vin Mariani.
And Pemberton's key addition was what?
The African cola nut, which introduced caffeine, a separate, powerful stimulant to the mix.
So he had a successful, if derivative, tonic. Then came the external pressure that forced the creation of the product we recognize today. What was that political catalyst?
That critical moment was a sudden change in local legislation. In 1886, Atlanta and Fulton County passed local prohibition laws, and this instantly made his French wine coca illegal due to the alcohol content. Pemberton, facing the overnight destruction of his product, was forced to pivot rapidly. He had to develop the non-alcoholic, carbonated version, Coca-Cola.
And it was an immediate commercial effort. It debuted on May 8, 1886, sold for 5 cents a glass at Jacob's Pharmacy in Atlanta.
Right, it was sold exclusively through drugstore soda fountains, and these were incredibly popular social spots at the time, partly because people genuinely believed that carbonated water had healthful properties.
So Coca-Cola was marketed very deliberately, not just as a refreshing beverage, but as something more.
Much more. It was a patent medicine and a highly moral temperance drink, positioning it as the antidote to the alcohol that Prohibition had just outlawed.
And they made some wild claims about what it could cure.
Oh, the marketing was hyperbolic, even for the era. They claimed it could remedy everything from nerve disorders, headaches, and general fatigue to indigestion and even impotence.
And the ultimate irony, given Pemberton's original struggle,
was the claim that it could cure morphine and opium addiction. It truly underscores the chaotic and unregulated environment of late 19th century medical marketing.
That really sets the scene for the next phase, which is less about invention and more about corporate maneuvering. The transfer of ownership sounds less like a structured business sale and more like a frantic scrum.
It was utterly chaotic, a legal minefield around 1888. Because Pemberton was ill and focused on his own struggles, he had made multiple handshake agreements.
So at one point, there were, 3 different versions of the product being sold?
By 3 separate businesses, yes. involving Pemberton, his son Charlie, and several influential Atlanta businessmen, most notably Asa Candler.
Asa Candler's the one who ultimately built the empire. But he had a tremendous obstacle in his way, right?
Yes, a self-imposed one by Pemberton. In an attempt to protect his son, John Pemberton had declared that the name Coca-Cola belonged exclusively to Charlie, his son. Others could technically use the formula.
Which was a huge complication for Candler, who correctly identified the name, not the syrup, as the key asset.
Exactly. And while he waited for the chance to secure the name, Candler tried to launch his own copycat versions.
And how did they go?
Not well.
Huh.
He was highly motivated, but initially unsuccessful. Sources indicate he sold his own syrup batches using alternative, frankly terrible, names like Yum Yum and Coke.
Yum Yum.
Yes. Those versions completely failed to gain any traction. Candler realized he needed the established goodwill of the Coca-Cola name at any cost.
And the cost of securing that name became incredibly low with the sudden death of John Pemberton.
That's the critical turning point. Pemberton died suddenly on August 16, 1888, a consequence of his long illness and addiction struggles. Candler moved with astonishing speed and, well, ruthlessness immediately afterward.
There are accounts of him showing up with cash at the funeral.
Reportedly approaching Charlie Pemberton's mother at the funeral, yes, offering money for the rights to the name. Regardless of the exact sequence of events, by August 30th, 1888, just 2 weeks after the funeral, Candler claimed he had secured sole proprietorship.
And when we look at the total financial investment he made to secure one of the world's most enduring and valuable brands, the number is stunning.
It really is. By May 1st, 1889, after consolidating all the various claims and settling debts, Candler claimed full ownership of the entire Coca-Cola beverage enterprise. His total investment outlay for this future global empire amounted to just $2,300.
$2,300.
That's it. To put that into perspective, it is an almost unbelievable return on investment, securing a monopoly on a brand that would eventually be valued in the tens of billions of dollars, all for the price of a modest used car today.
But wait a second, for that price, given the chaotic legal landscape, it sounds like there must have been some highly questionable tactics involved in getting those signatures.
That is precisely why the shadow over that acquisition didn't just disappear for decades. The rush and the complexity of the transfer led to significant controversy years later. In 1914, Margaret Dozier, who was a co-owner of the original company, came forward and claimed under oath that her signature on the 1888 bill of sale was a forgery.
And the evidence didn't stop with her.
No. Subsequent handwriting analysis, which was part of later legal battles, indicated that John Pemberton's own signature on the final sale document was also highly likely forged.
So who is signing?
The general belief among historians is that these documents were possibly signed or precipitated by his son, Charlie, who was desperately struggling to fund his own crippling addictions. It highlights that the bedrock of this massive corporate enterprise, the moment of its creation, rested on questionable, if not outright illegal transactions, secured amidst the chaos of a grieving family.
And Charlie Pemberton's story, which you mentioned, it's really the tragic footnote to this ruthless commercial success.
It truly is. Charlie, who theoretically held the crucial rights to the name, struggled severely with alcoholism and, critically, opium addiction, mirroring his father's earlier dependence on morphine.
A terrible cycle.
It is. In June 1894, he was found unconscious with a stick of opium by his side. He was taken to Grady Hospital in Atlanta, where he died 10 days later at the young age of 40.
It is a profoundly sad and stark reminder of the personal suffering and tragic cost of addiction that plagued the original inventor and his family, even as their formula was taking its first steps toward global fame.
It is.
It certainly pulls the curtain back on the brand's pristine image. Moving into the 20th century, the core product itself underwent changes, particularly concerning its two key ingredients, which brings us to the famous formula and the stimulants contained within it.
And the name itself, Coca-Cola, explicitly references those two original stimulants, the coca leaves and the cola nuts, which provided the caffeine.
Let's address the most infamous element first, the cocaine element, derived from the coca leaf. We often hear myths that the original Coke was extremely potent. What was the reality of the dose?
It was historically present, yes, but we need to compare it to modern usage to understand its actual strength. Pemberton's early formula called for 5 ounces of coca leaf per gallon of syrup.
Okay.
When diluted, this equated to an estimated 9 milligrams of cocaine per standard glass.
9 milligrams. And how does that compare to, say, a typical recreational dose?
It's much, much lower. A typical dose of cocaine is around 50 to 75 milligrams. So the amount in the drink was minor, essentially a very low trace stimulant. However, it was definitely there, and it contributed to the early belief that the drink was a powerful tonic.
So when did the company definitively remove the fresh coca leaves and, by extension, the active cocaine?
The company removed fresh coca leaves in 1903. What is critical for understanding the modern product, though, is what happened after 1904.
Okay.
The company did not cease using the coca leaf entirely. They switched to using what are termed spent leaves. These are the plant material leftovers after the cocaine has been extracted, and they only contain non-psychoactive trace levels of the alkaloid.
So even today, there is a connection to the coca leaf supply chain, but it is highly regulated and inert.
Absolutely. Today, the company uses a cocaine-free extract of the coca leaf. This extract is prepared by the Stepan Company, which is an extraordinary industrial detail.
What's their role?
The Stepan Company operates the only chemical manufacturing plant in the entire United States, authorized by the federal government, to legally import and process the coca leaves, which they source from Peru and Bolivia.
And what happens to the actual active cocaine that is extracted from those leaves?
The process is fascinatingly circular. The Stepan Company isolates and extracts the pure cocaine from the leaves and then sells that controlled substance directly to Mallinckrodt, a pharmaceutical manufacturer.
And Mallinckrodt is the only company in the U.S. licensed to purify it.
And distribute it, yes, for strictly medicinal use, primarily as a topical anesthetic. So in this incredible industrial twist, the original stimulant is still being legally processed and utilized within the U.S. economy, just not in the beverage itself.
It's a remarkable example of how transparently complex the supply chain for a basic soft drink can be. Let's move to the other stimulant in the name, the cola nut, providing caffeine. This ingredient led to a major legal fight early in the 20th century.
It did. The sources detail the 1911 lawsuit filed by the U.S. government, United States v. 40 barrels and 20 kegs of Coca-Cola. The government seized a large amount of the syrup and argued that the caffeine content was injurious to health, attempting to force the company to remove it entirely or prove its safety.
So the federal government was attempting to regulate a soft drink based on its stimulant content way back in 1911. That sounds remarkably modern.
It was a very early legal challenge to what we now call a functional food. Initially, Coke won the battle at the district court level. But this lawsuit prompted significant legislative action. In 1912, the U.S. Pure Food and Drug Act was amended specifically to add caffeine to the list of habit-forming and deleterious substances that manufacturers were required to label.
So to avoid further costly litigation and a potential Supreme Court ruling against them.
The company voluntarily reduced the amount of caffeine and settled the case.
And if we look at the modern product today, what is the standard stimulant level?
A typical 12 fluid-ounce serving contains a modest 34 milligrams of caffeine compared to over 90 milligrams in an equivalent amount of drip coffee.
So the listed non-secret ingredients you see today are carbonated water, sugar, caffeine, phosphoric acid, caramel color, and
finally, the highly protected natural flavorings.
The natural flavorings. That's the secret at the heart of the corporate mythology. Let's talk about the measures taken to protect that formula. The ultimate trade secret.
The security measures are legendary, and they are expertly leveraged for marketing purposes. For 86 years, the sole written copy of the formula was stored in the main vault of Truist Financial, then known as Trust Company, in Atlanta.
Guarded by a complex series of locks and limited access.
Exactly. Then, in 2011, in a highly publicized event, they moved it to a brand new custom-built vault, which is now on permanent display at the World of Coca-Cola Museum in downtown Atlanta.
There's the famous myth that only 2 executives know the formula and each only knows half. How close is that to reality?
Sources clarify that this myth is mostly for public consumption. While Coca-Cola does maintain a strict rule restricting access to the physical formula to 2 specific executives at any given time, reports indicate that each of those executives actually knows the entire formula.
I see.
Furthermore, historical records suggest that various scientists and company leaders beyond the current duo have known the precise formulation process over the years. It's a fantastic corporate story that enhances the mystery, but it's not quite the split secret many assume.
And speaking of the formula's details, in 2011 there was a major story on This American Life that claimed to have potentially uncovered an early version of the recipe. What came of that leak?
The show's staff found a recipe published in a 1979 edition of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which had been copied from a compilation called Everett Beale's Recipe Book. When the company archivist was shown the document, he acknowledged that the recipe could be a highly accurate precursor to John Pemberton's original 1886 formula.
A precursor. So it matched some of the details found in Pemberton's personal diary.
It did, but it's not the modern formula.
Crucially now.
No. The archivist emphasized that while it was a fascinating historical artifact, Pemberton's 1886 formula underwent numerous modifications over the subsequent decades, meaning the document did not reflect the modern, current, secret formula. So, the vault remains secure.
The company clearly takes this secret protection seriously, especially given the infamous 2006 case where an employee tried to sell the recipe to their biggest rival.
That case is a brilliant illustration of corporate espionage thwarted, and it's a great study in industry ethics. A secretary at Coke headquarters, Joya Williams, conspired with two accomplices to steal confidential trade secret documents.
And they then attempted to sell this information to Pepsi for $1.5 million.
They did. And this is where Pepsi played a truly surprising and critical role in protecting their competitor.
That's the amazing part.
They deserve huge credit here. Rather than seizing the illegal and potentially catastrophic opportunity to gain an unfair advantage, they immediately reported the illegal offer to Coca-Cola and the FBI.
Which launched a sting operation.
Exactly. FBI agents posed as Pepsi executives, culminating in the arrest of Williams and her accomplices. The public prosecutor later praised Pepsi's integrity, noting that protecting trade secrets is vital to the entire business community, even for competitors.
That moment of professional conduct is a stark contrast to the aggressive cola wars that often define their rivalry. Moving from the chemical formula, let's turn our attention now to the visual identity, specifically the iconic bottle shape.
The logo and the bottle are arguably as famous as the drink itself. The logo, featuring that distinctive cursive script, was created in 1885 by John Pemberton's bookkeeper, Frank Mason Robinson.
And he chose what was known as Spencerian script.
Right, which was the dominant style of formal, elegant handwriting in the U.S. at the time, giving the brand an instant air of sophistication.
But the real industrial design landmark is that physical shape, the contour bottle. What was the company asking for in that famous design contest?
In 1915, the company launched a national contest for its glass bottle suppliers, and the mandate was exceptionally clever and challenging.
The brief was to create a bottle that could be recognized.
Even if they felt it in the dark, and so shaped that, even if broken, a person could tell at a glance what it was. They wanted instant tactile identification.
That is a demanding brief. Who solved that design puzzle?
The winning design came from designer Earl R. Dean at the Root Glass Company in Terre Haute, Indiana. And the story of his inspiration is a wonderful case of accidental discovery.
Okay.
Dean and his colleagues wanted to base the design on the drink's two core ingredients, the coca leaf or the cola nut, but they couldn't find pictures of either at the public library for inspiration.
So what did he find instead?
He was instead inspired by a picture of a cocoa pod note. The phonetic similarity, cocoa instead of coca, found in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
The cocoa pod.
The cocoa pod, with its distinctive long-ridged, gourd-like shape, became the visual basis for the contour bottle. He quickly sketched that shape.
And the prototype had an immediate failure on the factory floor.
It did. Dean's very first prototype failed because the diameter of the middle section was too large, which made the bottle unstable and prone to tipping over on the high-speed conveyor belts used in the new bottling plants.
So he had to resolve this by
decreasing the middle diameter slightly, creating the pinched waist we recognize today. This final, resolved version was chosen over the other entries at the 1916 Bottlers Convention, and by 1920 it had become the standard, globally recognized package.
And that bottle, this simple piece of glass, actually became the catalyst for a landmark legal doctrine in U.S. consumer law. That seems like an enormous leap.
It is, but it's a hugely important link. In 1944, there was the famous case of Escola v. Coca-Cola Bottling Co. It involved a waitress, Juanita Escola, who was severely injured by an exploding Coca-Cola bottle.
And she sued, claiming the company should be held responsible even without proof of negligence.
Precisely. And this is where the legal precedent was set. For the listener who isn't familiar with the term, this was pivotal for establishing the doctrine of strict liability.
Which means?
It's a critical legal doctrine. It means a manufacturer is held liable for injury or damage caused by a defective product, regardless of whether the company exercised reasonable care or negligence during the manufacturing process.
So the burden shifts to the producer.
Entirely. Justice Roger J. Traynor of the Supreme Court of California used the Escola case to articulate that consumers rely on manufacturers to ensure products are safe. He argued that the cost of defective products should be borne by the manufacturer, who is in the best position to prevent defects and insure against the risk, rather than the injured consumer. So, yes, this explosion involving a 5-cent soda fundamentally changed modern consumer protection law.
That's a powerful consequence of a manufacturing defect. Let's shift our focus now from the formula and the bottle to the business model that allowed this product to conquer the world. A model that began with a massive and tremendously costly contractual blunder by the founder, Asa Candler.
This is a perfect example of a savvy entrepreneur getting the large branding picture absolutely right, but making a fundamental disastrous mistake in the fine print of a contract.
It started with the first bottling in 1894.
Yes, in Vicksburg, Mississippi. But the franchising business model solidified in 1899 when Asa Candler made an agreement with two Chattanooga entrepreneurs, Benjamin F. Thomas and Joseph B. Whitehead.
And what was Candler's mistake? He thought bottling was just a temporary logistical headache, right?
He vastly underestimated the potential of mass bottling. Candler, focused only on selling the syrup, gave Thomas and Whitehead control of the bottling procedure for the entire United States for the symbolic sum of $1.
Wow.
He quickly realized his error as demand exploded, but the contract stood. The real catastrophe, however, was in the terms of the contract itself.
Which essentially locked the price of the final product for decades, regardless of the changing world economy.
Exactly. The contract was notoriously loose. It specified that bottles would be sold to the public at 5 cents each, and critically, it had no fixed duration.
No fixed duration.
This singular oversight legally locked the price of Coca-Cola at 5 cents from 1886 until a full-service franchise model could slowly buy out those initial rights. This fixed-price era lasted until 1959.
Nearly 70 years, defying massive inflation, 2 world wars, and the Great Depression.
It's incredible. The bottlers made their profit margin on the mark of the syrup concentrate itself. Not the final retail price, but the fixed retail price did create massive problems for the company's internal logistics and advertising strategy.
Oh, we had to spend fortunes on ad campaigns just telling people a nickel was all they needed.
Just to ensure that retailers and vending machines couldn't justify raising the price. It required almost 70 years of complex negotiations and eventually buying back the various rights to finally break the nickel bottle habit. Candler even admitted he never collected his dollar.
So how does that highly decentralized model operate today, now free of the fixed price anchor?
The modern production and distribution follow a robust, streamlined franchising model. The Coca-Cola company itself only produces the secret syrup concentrate, which is known as 7X.
And they sell this concentrate to licensed bottlers worldwide who hold exclusive, geographically defined territory contracts.
Precisely. The bottlers take the concentrate, mix it with filtered water and sweeteners, carbonate it, and then handle all the packaging, marketing, and distribution to retailers, vending machines, and restaurants.
And this decentralized model allows for slight variations.
Yes, it's a minor benefit for consumers. Independent bottlers are allowed to slightly adjust the sweetening ratios according to specific local tastes and regulations, which can vary from country to country.
Speaking of sweetening, a major shift occurred in the formula in the 1970s, moving away from traditional cane sugar in the U.S. What was the economic rationale behind that?
That was a purely and profoundly economic decision dictated by global commodity instability. In 1974, sugar prices spiked dramatically.
Why?
Sources indicate this was largely due to high demand from the Soviet Union, coupled with possible market manipulation, which drove the cost of sugar to unsustainable levels for a mass-produced soft drink.
So they shifted to high fructose corn syrup.
Right. Because of these soaring prices, Coca-Cola made the fundamental shift in its North American production from using cane sugar to using high fructose corn syrup, or HFCS, which was cheaper and readily available domestically in the U.S.
Although, interestingly, you can still find the cane sugar version depending on where you look globally.
That's a key detail of the franchising system. Because of the decentralized production, imported versions, such as Mexican Coca-Cola sold in certain U.S. markets, often continue to use cane sugar instead of corn syrup, satisfying consumer demand for the original sweetener profile.
The ultimate formula change, however, was the infamous New Coke disaster of 1985. That must stand as one of the most painful, expensive lessons in corporate history regarding consumer sentiment.
It was an extremely painful, multi-billion-dollar lesson in marketing psychology. In April 1985, fearing they were losing ground to Pepsi's taste challenges, the company introduced New Coke.
And the internal rationale seemed entirely sound. The taste tests were positive.
Yes. Follow-up taste tests, conducted blindly, actually revealed that the vast majority of consumers preferred the taste of the new Coke formula over both the old Coke and Pepsi.
So if the taste tests were successful, the failure must have been purely emotional.
Entirely. Management fundamentally misjudged the deep emotional and nostalgic connection that the public had to the old product. People didn't just dislike the taste of the new formula, they reacted with fury against the perception that the company had killed a cultural icon, a piece of Americana.
And the backlash was immediate and severe.
Highly public, it involved consumer protest groups and mass media condemnation. The company had to reverse course almost immediately to staunch the bleeding.
Just 3 months later.
On July 10, 1985, the company made the humbling decision to revert to the old formula, branding it as Coca-Cola Classic. This reversal was one of the quickest corporate retreats in modern history.
The new Coke just lingered.
It did. Despite its taste test successes, it lingered on for nearly 2 decades, renamed Coke 2 until it was finally discontinued in 2002.
Which leads us to the subtle modern branding shifts. The disappearance of the word classic.
The word classic was a necessary defensive differentiator from New Coke for decades. But sources show that between 2007 and 2011, the company began strategically removing classic from its labels worldwide.
Why?
It was a deliberate attempt to rejuvenate the product's image, eliminating the lingering, decades-old association with a 1985 failure, and allowing the original product to once again be simply recognized as Coca-Cola.
They've also spent immense resources on flavor innovation and product variants over the years, with mixed success.
A long and often hilarious history of experimentation. There were the major successes like Diet Coke in 1982 and Cherry Coke in 1985. But we also see highly visible failures.
Like Coca-Cola Black.
The rich coffee flavor introduced in 2006, which completely flopped and was discontinued by 2008. Or Coca-Cola Life, sweetened partly with stevia and sugar, which aimed for the middle ground but was largely unsuccessful and gone by 2020.
And the pace of innovation continues today, trying to catch niche trends.
Absolutely. The company is constantly trying to capture new demographics. We see highly specific recent flavors like Spiced, which combined raspberry and spiced flavoring, sold in the US and Canada in 2024.
Then there are the extremely niche collaborative efforts.
Like the Oreo Coca-Cola Zero Sugar, planned for a 2025 release across 35 countries, clearly aimed at younger consumers looking for novelty. And they also launched the limited edition Coca-Cola Creations variants like Starlight and Ultimate, using unique flavor profiles to appeal to Gen Z.
Beyond flavor, we are seeing a crucial shift in packaging, driven by very modern consumer trends, particularly the success of the mini-can.
The mini-can trend is vital for understanding current market dynamics and how the company is adapting to health-conscious consumers. The 7.5-ounce mini-can was introduced in 2009 and has proven enormously successful.
It now accounts for about 9% of the sparkling soft drink market share in large retail stores.
Right. And it's gaining ground so quickly now because it perfectly aligns with multiple evolving consumer preferences.
Like weight management.
Exactly. Consumers are actively seeking smaller portion sizes, driven significantly by weight management trends. This includes the growing popularity of a new class of weight management drugs, GLP-1 receptor agonists, which often reduce appetite and make large portions undesirable.
So the company's adapting to a medical trends.
They are. They are also adapting to the growth of snacking culture, where smaller drinks pair better with light meals, and significantly, they are adapting to economic factors like shrinkflation.
Right, consumers accept less volume for a perceived lower price point.
Even if the price per ounce has increased, the company is responding by expanding the availability of these successful mini cans to convenience stores, a key market, starting in 2025.
That adaptability is key to their longevity. Let's shift gears entirely and discuss how this bottle of flavored carbonated water became one of the most powerful symbols of globalization and American influence, its global footprint.
Coca-Cola started its international journey quite early. Sales began in Britain in 1900, and the famous Cuba Libre cocktail, a mix of Coke, rum, and lime, was created in Havana shortly after the Spanish-American War in 1898.
A symbol of the new American presence there.
It was, but the real explosion that cemented its global status was after World War II.
The war proved instrumental.
The company lobbied the U.S. government to allow it to supply American troops overseas. This effort introduced the brand across South America and then rapidly throughout Europe after 1940. This is the moment Coca-Cola firmly established itself as a major symbol of American soft power and culture.
And this cultural spread became critically known in some academic and political spheres as Coca-Colonization.
Exactly. It truly became ubiquitous. I believe until recently it was only officially unavailable in 2 countries.
Cuba and North Korea.
That's right. As of 2012, Coca-Cola was officially sold in every country except those 2. Cuba is a massive irony, as their first bottling plant outside the U.S. was established in Havana in 1906, but official operations stopped after the 1959 revolution.
And more recently, Russia.
Yes. Following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, operations in Russia were suspended, illustrating how quickly geopolitical tensions can close down large markets.
The spread of the brand naturally created some fascinating cultural flashpoints, starting with the immense difficulty of translating the name into other languages, especially Chinese.
Translating the name was a linguistic nightmare in the 1920s. Initial transliterations attempted by local shopkeepers in China, which attempted to mimic the sound Coca-Cola, were culturally disastrous.
Because Chinese is a tonal language.
And ideographic. These sound-alikes often had completely literal and hilariously inappropriate meanings.
What were some of the worst translations?
Sources cite translations that meant things like female horse fastened with wax, or even stranger and less appetizing, bite the wax tadpole.
Bite the wax tadpole. I imagine that was a costly mistake to correct.
You don't sell a lot of soda promising a waxed amphibian. So they conducted an extensive search for characters that matched both the sound and conveyed an appealing meaning.
And they eventually settled on Coca-Cola,
which achieves both phonetic similarity and an elegant, aspirational meaning. The phrase translates roughly to allow the mouth to be able to rejoice. It's a masterclass in global branding.
The brand's political symbolism is perhaps best highlighted by the bizarre incident involving the Soviet military leadership after WWII, the White Coke episode.
This is a perfect, striking anecdote illustrating just how potent the symbolism of American capitalism and culture was during the dawn of the Cold War. Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov, a highly decorated and immensely powerful military official, developed a taste for Coca-Cola after the war.
But he absolutely could not be seen drinking such an explicit symbol of American imperialism.
Not by his subordinates or Soviet media, no. So a special arrangement was made. They had to create a covert version for him.
How did they pull that off?
The bottles were disguised to look exactly like standard Soviet vodka bottles. Clear liquid, plain cap.
Adorned only with the red star, a Soviet emblem.
Exactly. The secret consignment was even delivered to him by President Eisenhower during a conference. It's a remarkable example of how a consumer product had to literally change its identity just to cross entrenched political and ideological lines.
The brand has also faced opposition and sustained consumer boycotts globally, particularly in the Middle East.
Yes. There are significant historical and ongoing consumer boycotts in various Arab countries. These boycotts originated when the Coca-Cola company made early investments in Israel, an action that was seen as a contravention of the Arab League boycott.
So competitors like Pepsi and local alternatives gained market share.
They did. Brands like Coca-Cola became popular in those regions, turning consumer choice into a political statement.
Moving from geopolitical conflicts to technological feats. What about soda in space?
The U.S. government and NASA were interested in whether carbonated beverages could be consumed in zero gravity without excessive foam or bubble formation. So in 1995, a device called the Fluids Generic Bioprocessing Apparatus, or FGBA-1, was developed and flown on the space shuttle.
It was that successful.
It tested premixed beverages, mostly successfully. The next version, FGBA-2, which flew a year later, was more advanced. It was designed to actually mix carbon dioxide, water, and flavored syrups on board.
So it made fresh Coca-Cola and Diet Coke in orbit.
Successfully. It proved that even in zero gravity, the company and its rivals pursued complex market research and engineering solutions.
Let's transition now to advertising, where the brand is responsible for some of the most enduring cultural images, even those that are rooted in myth.
The Santa Claus myth is probably the most enduring and widely believed advertising misconception in history. The popular story is that Coca-Cola invented the modern image of Santa the plump, jolly man in the red and white suit.
Immortalized by artist Head and Sunplum's illustrations starting in the 1930s.
Right. But the sources confirm the iconic red and white motif predated Coke's usage.
Absolutely. The motif was already common in the U.S. and Europe. In fact, White Rock Beverages used the Santa Claus image in its advertisements for mineral water as early as 1915, and specifically for its ginger ale in 1923.
So Coca-Cola simply popularized an existing cultural image through mass media and consistency. They made it iconic and definitive, but they certainly did not invent the visual elements.
Other advertising highlights include some truly catchy slogans that entered the lexicon.
The list is a historical record of American culture. The pause that refreshes, it's the real thing. And, perhaps most powerfully, the hit single that came directly out of a 1971 commercial, I'd like to teach the world to sing.
And the company's influence permeates pop culture, involving promotional ties with huge figures like Elvis Presley, Latina icon Selena, David Bowie, and Whitney Houston.
It really cemented its status as a cultural driver.
More recently, though, the advertising strategy has run into a very modern controversy with the use of AI-generated content.
Yes, in November 2024, Coca-Cola released 3 short videos for its Christmas campaign that were partially AI-generated, intended to revive the emotional appeal of the classic 1995 Holidays Are Coming commercials.
And the immediate reaction was controversy, particularly from the creative community.
It drew significant and vocal backlash on social media, including sharp criticism from well-known creative figures like Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls.
And the core of the criticism was,
Whether a brand built on deep human emotional connection and storytelling should be replacing the artistry of illustrators with generative AI. The company defended the campaign, stating they were dedicated to creating the highest level of work at the intersection of human creativity and technology. But it clearly illustrates the tension inherent in utilizing AI for such a globally recognized and emotionally connected brand.
finally, in terms of successful modern advertising, the Share a Coke campaign was a massive viral success.
That campaign was brilliant in its simplicity and effectiveness. Starting in Australia in 2011 and then expanding to the UK in 2013, they replaced the traditional logo on bottles and cans with 150 of the most popular first names.
It personalized the product, encouraged consumer interaction, and generated massive social media buzz.
It transformed the packaging itself into a piece of shareable media.
That focus on packaging and volume brings us directly to the serious consequences of that industrial scale. We must now turn our attention to the serious criticisms the company has faced, ranging from public health issues to extremely grave ethical issues.
The criticisms are varied, consistent, and impossible to ignore given the brand's global ubiquity. On the public health front, the facts are straightforward. The drink is rich in simple sugars, whether sucrose or high fructose corn syrup,
And regular consumption contributes significantly to dental caries and obesity.
both of which are major health issues across the developed and developing world.
Beyond health, the environmental impact, particularly concerning plastic waste, is a huge global concern directly related to their immense scale.
It is a critical issue. The 2019 Break Free from Plastic survey delivered a devastating finding, naming Coca-Cola, including its sub-brands like Dasani, Sprite, and Fanta, the single biggest plastic polluter in the world.
The survey volunteers collected nearly 500,000 pieces of plastic waste worldwide, and over 11,000 pieces were directly traced back to a Coca-Cola brand product.
That scale of pollution demands a corporate response.
And the company has, thankfully, made pledges to address this environmental footprint.
They have. Recognizing the immense public pressure, the company announced a pledge in 2022 to make 25% of its packaging reusable by 2030, meaning bottles and cans that are refilled or returned.
This followed earlier commitments to use 100% recycled plastic in some bottles in the U.S.
Though critics argue the pledges don't go far enough or fast enough to match the scale of their waste production.
We also need to address the historical context of racial issues and civil rights, particularly when looking at the competition between Coke and Pepsi during the mid-20th century.
This historical contrast is a crucial insight into how corporate ethical stances directly influenced market share. Beginning in the 1940s, PepsiCo consciously recognized and marketed heavily to African Americans.
The consumer base that was largely ignored by most white-owned manufacturers at the time.
Pepsi hired black sales teams and promoted an anti-racism message as a powerful selling point.
And where was Coca-Cola positioned during this period?
Coca-Cola was, historically, far more conservative. Sources indicate a reluctance to hire black employees in visible positions, and the company chairman at the time was a known supporter of the segregationist Governor Herman Talmadge.
So Pepsi leveraged this difference, effectively attacking Coke's perceived segregationist stance in their marketing campaigns.
It absolutely did, and this strategic ethical positioning had a measurable market impact. As a direct result of Pepsi's intentional, inclusive marketing, their market share among African American consumers shot up dramatically.
By the 1950s, Black consumers were 3 times more likely to purchase Pepsi than Coke.
It's a clear historical case study showing how ethical choices and alignment with social movements can immediately and powerfully influence consumer loyalty and market dominance.
Now we must address the most serious and high-stakes allegations leveled against the company in the last few decades: the human rights claims in Colombia. We need to approach this topic with the gravity and sensitivity these allegations demand.
These are indeed extremely serious, grave claims involving human rights abuses. In 2001, the Coca-Cola Company was sued in a U.S. federal court in Miami by the Colombian Food and Drink Union, Sinal-Tranal,
And the union filed the suit on behalf of numerous workers and their families.
alleging that the company was indirectly responsible for extreme violence against union members.
What specifically were the claims made in that lawsuit?
The suit alleged that the franchised bottlers used or contracted with illegal far-right paramilitary death squads, specifically the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, or AUC, to target trade unionists.
The horrific allegations included the kidnapping, torture, and murder of Colombian bottler workers who were actively involved in trade union activity and attempting to organize.
It is a staggering human cost associated with labor disputes. It is truly appalling. These terrible allegations, which we must acknowledge led to deep trauma and suffering for the union members and their families, sparked international boycotts
Across the UK, US, Germany, Italy, and Australia.
aiming to pressure the company to provide compensation and mitigation for the pain inflicted.
And what has been the official, consistent response from the Coca-Cola Company to these high-stakes allegations?
Speaking from their Atlanta headquarters, the company has consistently denied any direct connection to these atrocities, stating firmly that Coca-Cola denies any connection to any human rights violation of this type.
And their primary defense rests on their business structure.
Right, adding that we do not own or operate the plants, referring to the legally separate franchised bottling model. However, these unresolved allegations remain a significant part of the scrutiny the company faces globally regarding its labor practices and accountability within its extended supply chain.
Despite the overwhelming global dominance of Coca-Cola and the long-running cola wars with Pepsi, Coke still faces tenacious competition in numerous regional markets where local tastes or histories prevail.
The competition is global, but the most interesting challenges are local and cultural. For instance, in Peru, Inca Cola is so dominant, it has a strong, sweet, yellow, bubblegum-like flavor that it routinely outsells Coca-Cola.
And this dominance forced the Coca-Cola Company to just buy the brand.
They purchased it entirely in 1999, effectively neutralizing a local competitor just to gain proper access to the Peruvian market.
And we see similar patterns across Europe, sometimes even tied to specific seasons.
Exactly. In Sweden, a traditional Christmas soft drink called Julmust, a dark spiced beverage, outsells Coca-Cola dramatically during the Christmas season. And in Scotland, the uniquely flavored bright orange drink Irn Brew was actually more popular than Coca-Cola until 2005.
It illustrates a fierce local brand loyalty.
It does, and India provides another fascinating example of this regional competition, even involving Coke's own acquired brands.
The Coca-Cola Company does not hold the majority market share with its flagship drink in India.
No, instead, 2 local brands they acquired perform much better. Thumbs Up, a local cola, holds 16% of the market, and Sprite, their lemon lime offering, holds 20%.
Significantly outpacing Coca-Cola itself, which only holds 9% market share.
Right. And then you have niche competitors, often tied to political history or regional identity. There is Vita Cola, which maintains strong loyalty in former East Germany, Breeze Cola in the French region of Brittany, and as we mentioned earlier, alternatives like Mecca Cola in the Middle East.
We have covered so much ground here, from John Pemberton's initial quest for a morphine substitute and the shocking corporate scramble to secure the name, through the use and removal of cocaine, the accidental design of the contour bottle, the painful history of the 5-cent price fix, and the serious geopolitical and ethical baggage the brand carries today.
What stands out most is the density of the history. It shows how cultural perception, industrial innovation, and complex geopolitics intersect around what seems like such a simple consumer product.
You see the massive, costly impact of one flawed 19th century contract locking in prices for decades.
And the surprising role of Pepsi in preventing industrial espionage and the literal disguise of the bottle to appease a Soviet marshal during the Cold War.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? What is the application of this knowledge?
It means that being truly well-informed about a product that sits on every supermarket shelf requires understanding its entire complex life cycle. This history is a microcosm of global capitalism itself.
Tracing its path from a patented medicine that contained trace cocaine through the ruthless competitive maneuvers of the Cola Wars.
Right up to its modern status as a symbol of globalization and, unfortunately, the world's biggest plastic polluter. This brand story is a continuous evolving commentary on culture, health, and ethics.
Let's leave you with a final thought, something to ponder about Coca-Cola's incredible hidden chemical history.
When you consider the practical utility of the product beyond refreshment, it reveals a hidden chemical power. For instance, medical sources report that Coca-Cola is sometimes used effectively for treating gastric phytobezoars. To be clear, we're talking about dissolving tough, undigested masses or lumps found in the stomach using the acidity of the drink.
And on a more common practical level.
That same chemical composition makes it effective for removing grease and oil stains from concrete and clothes. Think about that the next time you hold a bottle. It's capable of everything from cleaning oil stains and solving a medical problem to symbolizing American culture worldwide.
So what other simple object in your daily life has such a profoundly complex, hidden, and globally influential history? Thank you for joining this exploration.
Thanks for listening.